Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. The most visually arresting metaphor for the entire Trump era is getting worse by the day. We might call it the president's green Watergate. Yesterday, we showed you what a leaky, peeling, algae-infested mess the reflecting pool in Washington has become, thanks to Donald Trump's obsessive, costly attempts to turn it into a monument to, let's be honest here, his own brilliance. Just in time for him to hold a MAGA rally that is doubling as a 4th of July celebration for the whole country on the National Mall. Well, here was the scene today, as workers in hip waders worked feverishly to get the green out one way or another. This is a crash program at this point, folks, okay? There's lots of frenetic activity. It has included pumping the soupy, sage-colored fluid through a system of hoses to be discharged just down a storm drain. That, the man who came to Washington promising to drain the swamp is now swamping the drains. And there are the chunks of bottom paint peeling up to the surface. It turns out this is a waterproof material provided by the company that makes Rhino lining. It's a spray-on liner for the beds of pickup trucks. They apply to the reflecting pool. Doesn't look like it's working so well. It is just floating in the water now, except for the bits being taken as souvenirs by visitors, and there's actually quite a bit of that happening. In fact, Emma's now spoke to a few visitors of the pool today. Most were not impressed.
Part of it is sort of an olive green, and then there's this murky, blackish color. And then if you look a little closer here, it's more of a lime green.
There's people cleaning over there, and we saw the water come out. It looked straight like Mountain Dew.
For me, it's not the money, necessarily. It's the national embarrassment of it.
Oh, big piece there.
There you go.
It's my taxpayer souvenir.
Here is a series of aerial photographs of the pool from Reuters in the 2 weeks since they started filling the thing with water. It has gone from American flag blue, as Trump wanted, to pea green, to the point where you can actually see the bottom paint peeling and lifting toward the surface. It's not supposed to do that. That stuff has just been on there for a few weeks, less than 2 weeks. Of course, in absolutely true Trumpian form, no one in the Mad King's government can tell the king the truth about what we all see with our own eyes. On Wednesday, the Department of Interior, which oversees the National Mall, the National Park Service is in the Department of Interior, posted, quote, "The reflecting pool water is crystal clear, and our National Park Service team is now vacuuming up the dead algae resting on the bottom of some parts of the reflecting pool, just like the destroyed Iranian Navy resting on the bottom of the Persian Gulf." They included a photo of the pool taken from the water level, where the only color you can really see is the reflection of the sky. Like, that's the one shot you can get of this pool where it looks like that. The department added another photo from a similar angle, saying it showed how, and I quote here, and this is a phrase that will haunt me until I die, how the nanobubbler technology in vacuuming have been incredibly effective, making the water crystal clear with the American flag blue coating shining brightly on the bottom of the pool. That, of course, is obviously not true. What is true is if you take photos from those exact angles, you get nothing but a blue sky reflect on the surface. But as you just heard from actual visitors, anyone who walks up to the reflecting pool sees this. And that infamous nanobubbler technology the Trump administration is touting, well, there's new reporting on that. It turns out this story of Trump governance isn't just about vanity or incompetence or now up is down gaslighting, right? The pool is clear. It's all working. There is also, of course, because it is Trump, an old-fashioned corruption angle. Because the government has now handed out not one, but two no-bid contracts for work on the reflecting pool. The first was at least $13 million to paint that blue sealant that is now obviously peeling. But the New York Times, which has been doing great reporting on this, now reports there was another contract awarded in April. Now, this one was for $1.7 million to an Ohio company to install cleaning systems in the reflecting pool, which at the level of concept seems like a good idea. Did they do a bang-up job? That company is called Green Water Services. I am not making that up. The Times reports that Green Water Services, the actual name of the actual company that has helped to turn the water green in the reflecting pool, so it looks like Mountain Dew, is owned by a holding company. That holding company is in turn controlled by the gentleman you see there. His name is John J. Carafo, and this is him in 2002. Who is John J. Carafo, you ask? Well, I'm glad you asked. According to the Times, John J. Carafo is a donor to Donald Trump and a neighbor to Mar-a-Lago, the president's private club in Florida. In fact, Green Water Services lists Carafo's Palm Beach mansion as its address in Florida corporate records, the Times notes. Neither Carafa nor the company responded to the Times, but they report that Carafa's family business was in developing shopping centers, but he branched into other industries, including aerospace. Now, here's an interesting little detail from his past. In 2001, Carafa pleaded guilty to conspiracy to bribe Ohio Congressman James Traficant, one of the most flagrantly and notoriously corrupt congressmen of all time. His plea related to arranging nearly $27,000 in repairs on Traficant's houseboat and then buying said houseboat from him for another $26,000. All in all, $53,000. That's all why Traficant was lobbying feds on behalf of, and I'm not making this up either, a laser guidance system that Carafa was selling. He got leniency for testifying against the congressman. Now, would it shock you to learn that Carafa was also an early Trump supporter? Here you see him at a Trump golf resort in Palm Beach. And back in 2016, when Trump skipped a Republican debate to hold a rally in Iowa, this is very early in the election, he made a big deal of it, and he sort of said he was raising money for veterans. Well, he gave his donor and neighbor a shout-out.
J.J. Cafaro from Florida and from Cleveland. He's a man who made a lot of money in Cleveland, does a good job, and a fantastic man. $50,000. J.J., thank you.
He made a lot of money. I'm sure his laser guidance systems were great, too, as great as his green water nanobubble ozone technology. The White House and the Interior Department said the president was not involved in the selection of his neighbor's company to clean up the reflecting pool. I'm sure it was just a random coincidence. I'm sure they had fleets of civil servants going through to figure out who the best person was, and it just happened to be that guy who we have pictures of at Mar-a-Lago or Trump Golf Course. What we do know for sure is this reflecting pool is an obsession for Trump. The reason we're covering it right now, and I will admit I've done more reflecting pool coverage in the last week than the entirety of my previous career combined, is because it's about all Donald Trump has talked about for the last month. Anytime anyone talks to him, it's about the reflecting pool or the ballroom. Occasionally he'll talk about the war he started and lost. It is entirely possible he spent a lot of time on working the details out on the phone. Especially when you consider that this is a guy who, we've just learned from new reporting in a forthcoming book, is literally supergluing gold accents and challenge coins up on the doors and wall of the White House himself. You think he outsourced these decisions? Do you think he delegated on those? No, he probably micromanaged this just like he's done with the destruction of the East Wing for his ballroom and his UFC birthday bash. And as with those vanity projects, this one has turned into a corrupt, incompetent, expensive, and embarrassing mess he is trying desperately to cover up.
Mr. Attorney General, I wanted to ask a few questions about the anti-weaponization fund. We know that the department has agreed to pause this effort until at least June 12th. I wanted to ask what your plans were for the fund after June 12th.
So thank you. So look, we're not moving forward with the fund. You're right that there's a date that in the case in the Eastern District of Virginia in June, but we are not moving forward with the fund, period.
Well, there's some breaking news this afternoon on that $1.8 billion slush fund. The Justice Department is now refusing to say in a court filing in writing that it's officially killing it. A federal judge had ordered a sworn declaration in writing, putting an end to the slush fund by today. But DOJ is arguing that the declaration is, quote, unnecessary, and claiming that Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche's testimony to Congress, what we just played you, should be sufficient. That testimony, though, is not under oath and not under penalty of perjury. Now, all of this is because of the DOJ's continued resistance to backing off the fund in writing. The legal battles over it will thus continue. We're back with Congressman Krishnamurthy, Michael, and John. Congressman, it's, I guess, pretty obvious. It feels like a dumb question to ask, but for the record, why do you think they refuse to put in writing that the slush fund for payments for Trump's political allies, potentially including violent insurrectionists, is something they won't put in writing?
Because they don't want it dead. Regardless of anything that Todd Blanche said, President Trump wants this thing definitely alive. Contrary to rumors that it was on death row at that hearing, I think that it was probably transferred to that low security prison that Ghislaine Maxwell is at, that Todd Blanche transferred her to as well. And by the way, that's yet another reason that he should not be the Attorney General, And I have circulated a letter with regard to this issue to the Senate with a lot of signatures from my colleagues on it, saying he has no business being the Attorney General of the United States. He's still the president's personal lawyer, looking out for Trump's personal interests, not the best interests of the country.
Congressman, if you had to predict if enough Republicans share your view of the president's personal lawyer, who's acting as acting Attorney General, do you think there are enough to thwart his confirmation as AG?
Possibly, yes. I think this anti-weaponization fund is so unpopular with enough Republicans that I talked to that I could see, not enough votes for his confirmation. And Thom Tillis, I think, was one of those who basically said there's just no way that he could support Blanche's confirmation. And the reason is very simple. People like McConnell and others remember that the people that are supposedly going to get money from this anti-weaponization fund are the very insurrectionists that attacked the Capitol in January 2021. And I just don't think that this fund is going to go away as an issue for Blanche's confirmation.
Michael Feinberg, I don't like to put my eggs in the Republicans will grow a spine, do the right thing, even if it's for U.S. national security basket. But I will point out some signals of disapproval of the Blanche and/or Pulte picks. This is from John Cornyn. He tweeted out a quote from a Wall Street Journal piece that went like this, quote, "Here's where things go off the rails. When the president fails to acknowledge some hills simply can't be held and charges up anyway. That's what happened in the fight over Bill Pulte, wiretapping, and the Save America Act. His no-win standoff with his Senate GOP risks more than national security. It's accelerating his lame duck status." Sort of making an argument on the two fronts, protecting U.S. national security, which has never been persuasive for Donald Trump. But lame duck status gets right at his thin-skinned little underbelly of an ego. Do you think either of those will be persuasive, or do you think he's, as the Journal points out, charging up the hill?
I'm torn. On the one hand, I'm fortified by the fact that in order to oppose Todd Blanche, to keep him out of the RFK building as the permanent attorney general, you don't need all the Republicans. You just need a few. And one of the ones who seems like he might show the most spine is Thom Tillis, who, of course, is on the Judiciary Committee, where he actually wields quite a bit of power and could conceivably make it so that Blanche's name never even reaches the floor. But we've seen time and time and time and time again from January 6th forward, Republicans say that they've had enough and they're going to stand up to Donald Trump, only to back down when the rubber hits the road. So it's really difficult to say. But the reason I'm worried, and that I think Senator Cornyn's tweet is actually worth looking at, is the two departments that could be the most influential in helping the White House skew the results of the midterm elections or interfere with them being carried out in a nonpartisan manner befitting civil society is the Department of Justice, which is supposed to prosecute election crimes, but has already announced that it is not doing the command post for election night that it has done literally every year in recent memory, and ODNI, which now has Bill Pulte at the helm. So, am I glad Republicans are standing up, at least in small numbers? Yes. Am I still worried existentially about the future of our country? Also, yes.
Yeah, I mean, Heilman, you'd have to stick your head in the sand not to see exactly where Trump is heading with this. He's heading to the exact dramatic testimony we heard from his own White House insiders in the very dramatic primetime hearings of the January 6th Select Committee, absent the key figures who literally barred the door. I mean, he wanted to seize voting machines. That's what the Reuters information reporting suggests is what Pulte was rushed in there for this week. It's a report that they've been holding it for Pulte to arrive. They think Pulte is a better bet than Clayton, one could easily and logically surmise. So they rushed him in there Thursday ahead of what was supposed to be a start date of today. It's all out in the open. Trump already said in the Oval he's there to look into rigged elections. Trump wanted the military to seize voting machines, and it was actually Rudy who I think said that was going too far. So he called DHS and went online. This is all in the record. We know what he wanted to do on that front. And at DOJ, I mean, Bill Barr went on CNN ahead of the elections of 2020 and said he was going to pursue election fraud. It's Bill Barr who rather famously testified before that same select committee and said all the election fraud theories were bullshit. But here we are. No Bill Barr, no Rudy. I never thought I'd view that as an unfortunate occurrence, and no guardrails whatsoever.
Yes. Correct. That's the story of Trump 2.0 right there in a nutshell, Nicole. I don't want to. We're kind of talking about things because of the weirdness of the fact that Tulsi Gabbard got, by Trump's direction, got dragged into these supposed election integrity, these all of Trump's accusations of voter fraud. We suddenly are like, well, the DNI is involved in that, and when we're looking at, and obviously that is what Trump is doing with Bill Pulte. I just want to keep our eye on the ball. You are right that is what Trump wants to do. He wants to interfere with the November elections. He's made it clear. He's said it a bunch of times. We've talked about it a million times on the show. So what's the office by which he's going to do that? It's not going to, the front line of that is not going to be the DNI. The front line of that is going to be the Justice Department and the FBI. And so the question is, can he get Todd Blanche to be the actual Attorney General? And can he get Todd Blanche confirmed? And I know that you are not naive. And I know that Michael is not naive. And I know that everybody is couching all of their comments about, are the Republicans finding their courage? And yes, we've seen some signs of certain situations in which people are speaking out, and people who are, for various reasons, Bill Cassidy, John Cornyn, both feel betrayed by Trump. They couldn't find their spine before that. Tom Tillis has been opposing Trump in certain limited ways once he decided that he was going to leave the United States Senate. But I ask you right now, as we sit here, is there a Republican senator who's on the record opposing the nomination of Todd Blanche to be Attorney General? There is not. There is not one, right, even though the reasons to oppose that are manifest and obvious, and there are many Democrats who you could find, and most of these Republicans know what those reasons are. You don't need hearings to know why. You just have to look at Todd Blanche's behavior as acting Attorney General and as the DAG to know why he's not qualified to be the Attorney General of the United States of America. Yet no Republican right now is on the record for that, and I think that we are kidding ourselves if we think that that's a scattering of Republicans. I hope I'm wrong about this, but I'm much more in the camp of I'll believe it when I see it. When the Republicans, that small collection of Republicans band together and stop Todd Blanche, because that is where the rubber's going to meet the road on election interference. It's that the DOJ and the FBI, and that is why Todd Blanche matters so much, and why I am so disheartened and so not just disheartened, but I don't want to say petrified, but so why I find it so ominous that is where the action is going to be, and I think Todd Blanche is going to get through. That's why I'm feeling so unnerved these days.
MS Now's Jake Traylor is at the White House for us. Also joining us, MS Now political analyst, Columbia University professor, and former executive director of the New York Democratic Party, Basil Smikle, and Leah Littman, co-host of the Strict Scrutiny podcast and the New York Times best-selling author of Lawless, How the Supreme Court Runs on Conservative Grievance, Fringe Theories, and Bad Vibes. Speaking of vibes, Leah, the White House had insisted that private donations were paying for the ballroom. You now have this big transfer of taxpayer money. When asked for comment on the Washington Post story, a spokesperson would only say the East Wing modernization project is inextricably tied to the security of the president, the White House grounds, and the certain security infrastructure assets. Given all the ongoing litigation, does this play into any of that?
You would think it does play into it, only because they have repeatedly pitched this ballroom or whatever it is as some national security essential. But the more that they are just using this money to fund what is obviously a vanity project is going to undermine that claim. And it's just a perfect example of how Donald Trump and people in the administration feel entitled to be kept men. And they are using the public fisc to fund these projects, even when they're insisting, no, we're not doing that. And it's going to undermine their arguments in court. It's going to undermine their arguments in public, and should just be a slow rolling, unfolding disaster.
Let's talk about how it shapes the arguments in public, because the fact that they are willing to transfer 10% of the Secret Service budget to this, it is such an expression of where their priorities are. I think most Americans can metabolize that pretty quickly.
Yeah, I love the entitled man or kept man. I love that. I'm going to use that. I'll credit you. But to me, this is another example of how the president uses public money, public institutions, public symbols to bend to his aesthetic. And there could not be a better contrast than today, of all days, the first day of the Obama Center opening, because Obama was very intentional. President Obama was very intentional about saying, this isn't about me, which is why it's not a library or museum. It's a center. It's a public building. It's not about him. It's about the history of this country, the opportunity of this country, and all that can be possible. Whereas when you think about what Donald Trump is doing, that ballroom comes across as a very exclusive space. Mar-a-Lago comes across as a very exclusive space. That contract that went to that no bid contract, yes, that exclusivity, that is the message that should be hammered home. That anything related to Donald Trump is about him, it's about vanity, but it's also about this exclusivity. It's not about people. And again, that is a perfect contrast to what we see unfolding in Chicago.
I mean, $1.7 million in a no bid contract, and the president's big defense is, well, I'm not the one who issued the contract, which to me actually speaks to the point, which is the corruption is in the system itself, right? You don't have to any longer be the one who is making the decisions. The people around you understand the rules of operation. And that disentangling is actually more difficult. If it were just as easy as Donald Trump, no longer being in office and it would all fall away, that is one thing. But the corruption is now baked in.
Yeah, and it's a perfect example about how part of the price of corruption is incompetence. When we talk about the spoils system of the Gilded Age, we called it the spoils system because political favors, money were given to people based on whether they were loyal or friends. And it's just selling off the capacity of the state and undermining the state in order to give it to your friends. I mean, I jokingly refer to things like this as the deal dough. They're just agreements that screw over the country. And it's just a perfect example of this. I mean, again, he was hired to clean up the reflecting pool, and the reflecting pool is filled with algae. Is this their Green New Deal? It's just absurd.
Drake Schiller, you are with us with your White House reporting. Do they understand just how bad this is?
Yeah, I mean, Alicia, that's the question here. They do. They're not publicly talking about it in the same way, obviously. I will say one thing that's notable is they're talking about the algae and the reflecting pool the same way they're talking about Iranian military, so much so that the Department of Interior put out a statement comparing the two, saying that the National Park Service team is now vacuuming up the dead algae resting on the bottom of some parts of the reflecting pool, just like the destroyed Iran Navy resting on the bottom of the Persian Gulf. A striking statement there, obviously. For one, the comparison is unique given the state of affairs with Iran right now. But separately from that, I'd just say that that statement isn't necessarily true. I mean, we just saw some of that video of what the pool looks like right now. If atop it, it is very green and murky. There's algae throughout, top to bottom. Also, the sealant that we keep seeing there also is a separate no-bid contract awarded to a different company there. We had one of our colleagues, Adam, a desk assistant from MS Now, earlier there on the scene talking with different folks that have traveled from across the country, of course, on America's 250th anniversary to see the reflecting pool for the first time. He said he witnessed different individuals picking off parts of the sealant that was floating on the pond, taking it home as souvenirs, saying they were going to sell it on eBay. So a bit almost of a mockery of what was this multi-million-dollar investment that was a no-bid contract. And it is important here, Alicia, too, I'll just say, as we've been talking about, to look through the murky water and look at the bigger picture here, which is that this no-bid contract awarded for the reflecting pool for the sealant is not just specific to the reflecting pool. It has been multiple of the president's projects, personal pet projects that we've seen take place over the past few months. And the White House continues to say, we're doing no bid, we're skirting around the rules here, all because of the celebration of the 250th anniversary. That precedent just doesn't exist. Normally, anytime that process is circumnavigated, it's related to war, something much more significant. The White House, in this case, is all pinning it on the 250th anniversary. But even then, so many of these projects that are underway are not going to be completed by the actual anniversary themselves.
Can we put the statement that Jake referenced comparing what is happening at the reflecting pool to what is happening in Iran back on the screen? I forget the word that Jake used to describe it, Basil. I would use the word callous, inane. And also, this administration should not be trying to tie their multiple failures to one another.
It's a disgusting statement, plain and simple. But going back to the UFC fight, everything with this White House is a blood sport. He has a very pugilistic approach to governance and policy. This isn't about working across the aisle. It's not about navigating difficult politics or negotiation. It's beating people to a pulp. We saw that literally on the White House lawn, and we see it multiple times throughout his presidency. And I wonder, just looking long term a little bit, will Iran for Republicans be like Iraq was for Democrats back in 2004 and 2008? Meaning, will the Republican Party look back on this moment and hold their leaders accountable when they run for office? Where were you on the Iran war? Where were you when all of this was happening?
Well, I think this is part of why Republicans in Congress are confused about whether or not they want to get on the record, whether or not they want to force a vote on this, because then, of course, they would actually be on the record. And listen, the reason we are talking about the reflecting pool is not just because it's an incredible visual that somehow encapsulates all that is happening in Washington, D.C. from a president who promised to drain the swamp, right? There's the no-bid contracts and the corruption element of this. There's also the fact that this was a president who critiqued the former president for the fact that he was not laser-like focused on the economy and the issues that Americans care most about. And yet he has given us example after example of his own distraction, right? The fact that he would rather invest time, money, resources, his own attention in vanity projects than in actually delivering on any of the things he promised to Americans.
Yeah, and this is someone who now says affordability, what's that? I don't care about that.
It's a term Democrats made up.
Right, apparently. And it's just a perfect example about how his approach to governance is regressive. Instead of, it's like Robin Hood, steal from the rich to give to the poor, this is just steal from the public to grift for the rich and then sell them a lie in the process. Instead of actually meeting their needs, he is undermining the state and the capacity of government to actually meet people's needs. Again, just for delivering himself these things that make him feel important, like a big man.
Well, speaking of things that make him feel important, I want to make sure that we get to the Kennedy Center here because there's another court deadline for the administration. They have to detail how they'll keep the center open to public events rather than shut it down for 2 years for renovations. How do you see all this going?
I loved seeing and hearing that his name was taken down from the Kennedy Center, because I think that this litigation is a perfect and poignant reminder about how, one, the lower courts matter, because the lower federal court is, of course, the institution that required the name to come down and is going to require this to be open. And it is also an encapsulation of how we are going to have to undo the physical damage, the structural damage, the political damage that he has done to our institutions, whether that's taking his name off, whether that's reopening public places, whether that is cleaning up the reflecting pool, whether that is taking corruption out of government, you name it.
Well, I always call this the Humpty Dumpty of it all. It's easy to break. It is hard to put back together. Just real quick, Basil, just to add to this ever-growing list of projects, Air Force One has not been insulated from Trump's redesigned dreams. The White House says his G7 trip was the last journey for a 35-year-old Air Force One jet, and they are phasing in the $400 million Boeing 747 that Qatar gifted to Trump.
Yeah, is he going to keep it when he leaves office? Probably so. And going to your point, I hope that we are keeping a record of everything that he's taken down, closed, and all the people that he's replaced, because in addition to, Democrats wanting to get the House back and the Senate back and the presidency back in 2 years, there has to be a period of restorative justice in a way, right?
Yes.
You've got to restore and reclaim everything that was lost, maybe even including an airplane, because, the Kennedy Center wasn't just his name. It was also the board that he replaced, right? And so he has done everything that he could to bring this entire country to his feet, right? To be able to bend to his will. And my only sort of statement on this is we can keep it from happening further and stop the hemorrhaging, but we have to be very intentional and take a lot of planning and opportunity to actually restore and reclaim everything that was lost.
What I thought of when I read the New York Times reporting about this no-bid contract was just how much we don't know that is happening, right? Until this reporting surfaces these questions, there are a lot of contracts one has to imagine floating around. All right, Jake Triller, Leah Littman, what a treat to have you at the table. Thank you so much. Basil, you are sticking with me.
President Trump sat down with Mark Caputo of Axios at the White House yesterday for his first interview since signing the agreement that extends the ceasefire with Iran. Here's part of that conversation.
What have you learned about not just the exercise of power, but the limits on your power as a result of the conflict?
There are no limits.
No limits.
No, I haven't learned that lesson yet. I know there are, but, there are no limits. We defeated them totally militarily. Who else could have done a blockade like that? I did a naval blockade where not one ship was able to get through. Some tried. They didn't, it didn't last very long.
And it certainly brought Iran to the table more than before. However, beginning a conflict, you had talked about you only wanted unconditional surrender. And the MOU doesn't look like unconditional surrender.
Well, it really probably is unconditional surrender.
And White House reporter for Axios, Mark Caputo himself, joins us now. Mark, good morning. So take us inside that conversation with the president. There's a lot, even just in that one clip we played there. This is not unconditional surrender for Iran, obviously. But what stood out to you?
What stood out for me is the guy didn't really sleep. The president hadn't slept much. I think maybe 2 hours. He had flown back from Europe. But his general attitude was very positive, despite all of the negative commentary and pushback over the deal. The president seems pretty relieved because he has an exit here. And he's looking at two things. He's looking at the stock market and he's looking at the price of oil. And the price of oil is down. And at one point in the interview, he said it, or at a few points in the interview, he said that. At one point, he said, it's a gusher, as if he literally struck oil through this deal because of the price lowering. And that really impressed me because it just shows what Trump is really focused on. Yeah.
Mark, you talked also about, a whole range of things. You had half an hour, I think, with the president. You spoke about regime change. You also spoke about his relationship with Netanyahu. We heard J.D. Vance earlier being very critical of the Israeli government, surprisingly so for an American vice president. How was the president when you asked him about his relationship at the moment with Netanyahu? I
specifically asked him that, and he said, Bibi, we're good. He said, but we've got to keep him, and he sort of paused for a second, sane. And I said, well, how do you control Israel from attacking Lebanon and possibly sort of starting to wreck the ceasefire, this deal? And he says, they're going to do what I say, and they listen to me. And it was just a very kind of clear statement from Trump that he thinks he has so much influence over there because of not just his relationship with Netanyahu, but also I think Israel's standing in the world, as Vance indicated, that he has this sort of ability. Now, whether or not Netanyahu is going to go along with it, who knows? We reported a little while ago at Axios that very hot phone call that Trump had with Netanyahu, and Netanyahu attacked Lebanon at a certain point, and the Iranians started to pull out of negotiations and caused all the Sturm and Drang. So it's less of a close relationship now than it was heading into the war.
he spent the last few days in Europe as the details of the MOU started to come out. And we report on the program the number of Republican senators, Cassidy, Cotton, Wicker, who have now come out pretty critical about the deal. Do you think, and you say that the president sounded genuinely positive about what he had achieved, do you think now that he comes back and he turns on Fox News and he's sitting in the residence and he's watching television and he sees the criticism even coming from Fox News, that that's going to change his mind about this deal, or that it's going to make it harder for him to defend it?
Woe betide him who predicts what Donald Trump is going to do. Nevertheless, I would find it difficult to believe that he would change that much. My general view of Trump is that if you criticize something that he has started to put his chips in, he doesn't like the criticism. I asked him during the interview, are you going to punish any of the Republicans who oppose you on this? Because there are elements of the deal with sanctions that are going to need to come back to Congress for sort of a final approval, in part to set up or make effective this $300 billion reconstruction fund. And it took me a little while to get the president to answer, but he said basically no. Now, I'm wondering if that'll change. That is, if the criticism reaches a fever pitch from his own party, does he start to really push back and start to target people? I don't know that.
So, Mark, congrats on the interview. Obviously, it's yet another example of President Trump trying to assert his own reality, right? Living in denial, I'd argue, about some of the outcomes here in Iran. But he can read the polls, and certainly other members of the Republican Party can, and they see how unpopular this war was and currently how unpopular he and the GOP is. So, is there any recognition, not from Trump himself personally, but aides you've talked to, just about what a bind they're in? Is there any sort of concern as to what this meant for November?
If you scratch a few layers beneath the surface, yeah, you'll hear that, but there certainly is going to be nothing on the record or even on background. But you can tell that what was just really concerning them is not just the poll numbers, but what was causing the underlying poll number troubles, and that was the price of gas. And my guess here, having talked to them over the past few months about the war, is that the argument they're going to make is, look, everyone was complaining about gas prices. Well, gas prices are coming back down, and therefore what the president is proposing is a good idea. And that might be a challenging argument for his opponents and his critics to push back on. Just realize the American people don't really pay a lot of attention to the finer points of foreign policy and, these various points of the MOU. They're focused on their lives, and they're driving around, and every day there's been a scoreboard on street corners that people have seen, and that's the price of fuel. Even if you drive a Tesla, you at least can see what the price of fuel is doing, and it's been up, and people don't like it. And now it's going to come down, and the president's hope is as a result of that coming down, the fortunes of Republicans increase. That is, if they take yes for an answer, his version of yes, and embrace this deal.
One of the many extraordinary moments in this interview, when you ask about regime change, you say, how is this regime change? And the president says, well, they are different people. Khamenei Jr. is different from the father, which I guess technically is true, but probably not the definition of regime change. You can see the full interview online for Axios. White House reporter for Axios, Mark Caputo, thanks so much for bringing it to us.
It is a day more than a decade in the making. The Obama Presidential Center has opened to the public officially. The center stands as tribute to the Obama's family roots and the contributions they've made, as well as a major investment in the larger South Side community out there in Chicago. Joining us, Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson. Also, Leon Panetta, who is still with us. Secretary Panetta, I just want to begin with you because you served under President Obama, multiple different stints under President Obama. What does it mean to you to see this center open and to hear directly from both Michelle and the former president yesterday, especially in this moment?
Well, it was an honor to serve in the Obama administration and to serve with a president who was committed to doing the right thing and trying to make people's lives better in this country. And to have the president build a library that isn't just a mausoleum, but is really part of the Chicago community, the South Chicago community, an area that he wants to bring people together to be able to enjoy it, to be able to understand what his administration was all about, but more importantly, to be able to enjoy life and come together. That's what the Obamas are all about. Both of their speeches touched on the importance of our values, the importance of being good American people who have a sense of why every person has dignity and why our country ought to be unified. That memorial that was opened up, that library that was opened up, is going to speak to future generations about why it's important to protect our democracy. And I think that's what the Obamas wanted this library to be.
Yeah, and then there was the moment yesterday, and this is what stuck with me and is still sticking with me. He really defended the history of this country and the meaning of this country, Secretary. He talked about how we were the first place in the world to come up with a system of government where the people came first, where we weren't just bullied by a strong man. The people came first. And yes, it was flawed, but we have been building on it, building on that initial conception of freedom and what it means to pursue happiness ever since then. And in this moment where everybody can feel a bit dejected and frustrated and maybe disillusioned, that we need to bear down and remember that we can, when we band together, despite the adversity, make a difference. I think it's a message that a lot of Americans, especially in the Democratic Party, needed to hear.
You know, in many ways, the opening of that library is what I believe is the right way to celebrate the 250th anniversary of our democracy. Because that library and the values that it represents about what our country is all about and what we've been able to achieve in 250 years and how we've come together as a country, recognizing the importance of our humanity, recognizing the importance of our democracy, recognizing the importance of each other. That is a much greater celebration of what America's all going to be than what's going to happen on July 4th with a bunch of political rallies. So I think in a real way, what President Obama and Michelle did yesterday is to really speak to a country that needs to understand the real values that our country is about and that it has to be about. And because of that, I just have this sense of hope that no matter what we have to go through in these next few years, that in the end, because it's up to we the people to be the ultimate check in our system, that the Obamas have basically said, we the people are the ones who are going to have to make sure that our democracy survives. So I'm very hopeful that as a result of the president and Michelle kind of setting that message, I think there is hope that ultimately, no matter what we're going through now, that our democracy will survive and be stronger in the future.
Secretary Panetta, thank you so much for sticking around. I'm glad we could get you on the opening of the Presidential Center today. Appreciate it.
Good to be with you.
All right, Mr. Mayor, let's talk about Chicago. It's in Chicago. It's on the south side of Chicago. And the Obamas have made clear that they didn't want it to be a library, a mausoleum sort of place, like the Secretary is just saying, but a living testament to the community and a place where people can gather and they can give back. What is this, in your estimation, what do you hope it does for the south side?
Well, first of all, I want to say, happy Father's Day to all of my fellow dads out there. And of course, we're celebrating Juneteenth. So happy Juneteenth to all of America. Look, the President Obama and Mrs. Obama, they are still inspiring people. This center, this facility, this edifice, this campus is a shining example of not only what's possible in our country, but when we come together, centering our work around our shared values, that we can create a democracy that works for everyone, because that's the ultimate goal, is to ensure that we have safe and affordable communities, the mission that I'm driven by here in Chicago, and people from around the city, around the country, and around the world get a chance to come to our great city and experience that additional hope that we most certainly need in this season.
What has the reaction been so far?
It's been just outstanding. You know, I was there not just yesterday, but I was also in attendance today because there's an actual public library, a Chicago public library inside of the Obama Center, which I think is so appropriate. And when we think about what we fought for in this country, to ensure that every single person had access to our public institutions, and you had President Obama and Mrs. Obama reading to students who are coming to the library, a public library, a free space in this center during the summer months, right? And so on my way out, there were visitors from all over the world, folks from the west side, south side of Chicago, different parts of the state of Illinois. I met a woman who came all the way from France to experience this moment. And so this is clearly, I believe, a place where we can continue to organize and to ensure that we're creating opportunities for generations to come.
And we can already see the lines of folks gathered there today on this Juneteenth for the grand opening of the Presidential Center. Congratulations on getting it done in your great city. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're certainly welcome, and we're looking forward to people from all over the world to come visit the best city in the world, the city of Chicago. Thank you all.
And happy Father's Day, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate your
Thank you.
time today, and I hope you have a lovely weekend.